Well, good morning, everyone. We've got a nice crowd. We're going to need to bring in more zafus and change our structure a little bit so that we can fit people in better. It's so nice to have so many of us here. So often when we talk about meditation, we're given a fairly simple instruction to follow the breath, to notice the thoughts going past like clouds in the sky and just let them go past. To scan the body and check our posture, our mudra. But there's also room in our meditation practice and in our daily life to actively contemplate the Buddhist teachings. And so I want to talk about three different teachings that I think that are really good to contemplate. And the good thing about contemplation is you can do it anywhere. I often contemplate early in the morning in bed, lying there thinking over things, and we do zazen at 6, but I often wake more like 4:30 or something. I just lie there and think about things, think about Dharma things. Just, it's good to find spaces like that. If you're on a bus or on a train or driving or going for a walk or waiting in line somewhere, places where it's also good at those times to just notice your environment, of course. It's really good just to simply notice the floor, the walls, the people, the sounds. It's also very good practice. But sometimes it is nice to, more than nice, it's a way of cultivating wisdom to really contemplate some of these core teachings, which are not exclusive to Buddhism, of course, but we have our particular language and our particular way. So one of these we could call lifespan, which I think sometimes is an interesting word rather than saying impermanence or everything changes, because we're so used to hearing things like everything changes. Yes, well, I know that. Impermanence is just this Buddhist word that gets used a lot. I mean, it's an ordinary word, but we use it in Buddhist literature a lot. But lifespan we don't use so much. So sometimes it's nice to find a different word just to capture the imagination. So the contemplation that you can do with this is starting with anything like this teaching stick, is you can ask, what is the lifespan of this stick? What is its lifespan? So then we have to begin to think, where did it start? Well, I mean, we can't find a starting point, but let's just sort of pick a fairly arbitrary one. The tree that it came from. We could go back, of course, way back, but let's just start the tree. I wonder if it was cut down or whether it was just a found piece of wood. We don't know, or we might know. And then it got taken into a workshop. Must have been a person who shaped it. And it got polished and some sort of oil got put on it. And then it got given to me, this particular one, by my teacher. Don't know exactly where they got it from or who. I don't know the whole story of this stick. But, and then I wonder what will happen to it. Like I might have it for, if me and the stick are lucky, we might hang out together for another 20 years if we're lucky. And then what's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen to this stick? Will I give it to someone? Will they then have it? Will they drop it by accident out of their backpack one day and it just gets left in a gutter and rots? Who knows what's going to happen? But at some point it'll disintegrate. Maybe it'll get caught in a house fire. Maybe it'll crack and eventually whoever has it will say, look, this stick's end of its life, and they'll do some sort of service for it. So it'll be honoured in some way. I don't know. So thinking about the lifespan of things Starting with an object, I think, is good. Any object. I was contemplating all of this while I was driving to Canberra yesterday. And I was looking at just signs like welcome to ACT sort of signs. And I thought, what's the lifespan of that sign? You know, how did that sign start? Where will that sign go? So you can start with an object, because I think that's easy. Then something that's a little more subtle is to think about our thoughts. Where did that thought first start? When did I first start having that particular type of thought? I wonder how long I'll have that thought for. I wonder how it'll change over time. I wonder how it has changed over time. Thoughts about ourselves, thoughts about others. So we can contemplate like that. And it's not that we're looking for an answer. I think one of the things that I particularly like about the Buddhist tradition is it's not so concerned about landing on a right answer about anything. Often we talk about two truths, but I quite like the teaching of three truths, which is just an idea. And the first truth is the truth of how things appear or how they're experienced. So talking about the stick is a bit like that. I can see it, I can have thoughts about its life based on my experience of other things. So there's the truth of how things appear to us in the world. There's the truth of how things relate to each other, so the relational aspect. There's the things and then the relationship. There's a whole way in which we could explore relationships. And then there's the truth of how things essentially are. How things are that is unchanging, sort of a quality of things. A quality of things that can't really be apprehended particularly by our eyes or our ears. So there's three different ways, at least three different ways of seeing things from a Buddhist perspective. So contemplating lifespan, we're not trying to land on an answer. It's just a way to explore. The way I like to think of it is to bring our imagination creatively to our experience so that we don't end up becoming too narrow in our view, because it's often a very narrow, blinkered view that people have that leads to their own and other people's suffering. It's the very contracted, narrow view of things. So this practice of contemplation is to get us used to thinking much more widely and creatively and not trying to land on an answer. Just to be able to hold it very widely. So the lifespan of objects, lifespan of thoughts, lifespan of people. I wonder how old that person is. I wonder where they were born. I wonder what their upbringing was like. I wonder why they do what they do now. I wonder what will happen to them. I wonder when they will die. It's good to contemplate like that. One very simple effect of contemplating about people's lifespans is it can help us be more caring towards them, because we can remember that they were babies, they were toddlers, that they had to go through adolescence, that they've had to figure out their career and their relationships and so on, and that they will have something happen at some point and they'll pass away. And that's, I think, helpful to remember that applies to everyone. So contemplating the lifespan of others. And there's certain people that we have a habit to not think of that way. There's some people we tend to think as very fixed, as if they'll always be there. Some people are a bit like that with their parents. Sometimes people are a bit like that with someone they particularly admire, like a musician or something, and they get shocked, like, oh my God, they've passed away. I thought they'd be around forever. Sometimes people that a lot of people don't like, we forget that they're vulnerable and that they're just going to get old and die too. So don't hate them. So contemplating the lifespan of people. And then we can also contemplate the lifespan of other things that we tend to take as being permanent, such as cultures, countries, mountains, planets. We tend to, because of our human lifespan being so short, have difficulty realizing that all of these things that have far longer lifespans are also constantly in a state of change. If you look at a map of, sort of a political map of the world, I don't know, even 100 years ago, there'd be quite a few different country boundaries. And 200 years ago, they'll be far different. And 400 years ago, far different. And then the maps didn't even exist a bit before that. So this is a contemplation on lifespan, which is a different way of talking about impermanence or flux or change. It's very helpful. Another contemplation, so that's the lifespan contemplation. And then, who am I? Who am I? We can really contemplate, who am I? And there's lots of ways to consider who we are. If we think about it just from our, like, what defines me, if we think about, like, what defines who I am? If we think about the body, although it might seem a little strange to contemplate, this is in the literature. Would I be me if I didn't have my hands? Would I be me if I didn't have my legs? If I didn't have my arms and legs? What if I didn't have my mind? Or if I couldn't talk? If I couldn't think? If I was in a vegetative state? At what point am I not me anymore? This is a useful thing to contemplate, because different people have different ideas where they would draw the line for themselves, and we realise that you can't find a very, very good spot. I was thinking about this, that I know quite a few people who have cared for their parents who have had profound dementia, and they still love them. Even though that person doesn't know who they are, that doesn't know who their adult child is, and they don't know who they themselves are anymore. They're fairly profound. People still love them, still care about them. There's still something that's still them. Even if they don't know it, there's still something that's still them. And when people die, we go through a funeral process, and people visit graves. So there's a sort of we can't find the edge of what defines who we are. So in a way, who I am is quite particular. Who each of us are is quite particular. Like I quite often say, we don't get mixed up. We don't mix each other up with each other. We know who we all are. We don't make that mistake. But at the same time, I'm made of things, like I didn't make myself. I didn't make my hands. I didn't make my mind. I didn't make my DNA. Other people and other things made everything that's me. So when we contemplate who I am, we also can contemplate this. Besides the particular who I am, we can explore the me that's made of everything that's not me. So this is a contemplation on, like, there is no me, there is no particular me. I'm made of all these other things. We're all made of all these other things, and we didn't make any of them. Everything else made us. All the material that we're made of, we didn't make. It was just already there in the earth. And we breathed it in, and we ate it, and we drank it. And all our opinions and our capacities, all our abilities, all our shortcomings, all our neuroses, all of these came from everybody else and everything else. We didn't invent any of them. We didn't just pluck them out of thin air. They slowly emerged, were built kind of by everything around us. So when we think about who am I from that perspective, we start to feel very large and very inclusive. wow, I'm just kind of part of everything. You know, I'm just part of everything. I'm a little peak of water on a huge ocean. Just a little distinct peak. It's there. It's particular. It's a little peak of water, little wave, but it's part of a very big ocean. And that's a very comforting thought too. It can help us have less self-concern, because we can see that we're all profoundly created by each other. We can be a little less sort of caught up in a very narrow, self-referencing kind of world. We can feel a part of something far bigger than us. So that's the second thing that we can contemplate. Who am I? And we don't have to answer it. We don't have to land anywhere. We just keep exploring it. And it's a lifelong exploration. You know, one can explore this for a very long time. Who am I? And of course the mirror image of that is, who are you? Who is this little fly that keeps landing on each of us? You know, what's its lifespan? And what's its whole history? What's its experience? How did it get to be here? What will happen to it later today or tomorrow? How did it evolve in the first place? We can do this with everything. It helps us actually notice and appreciate things, to think about these contemplations and apply them very widely. And then another one, and these are just the three that I just thought would be good to talk about. There's many, many different teachings that one could contemplate in depth. But another one is not knowing. So to contemplate, what do I know about something, or what do I not know? What don't I know? And it's really amazing how quickly we realise how little we know about, the world as it appears to us. Like just the way I don't really know the history of this stick. I feel kind of connected to it. I've had it for a number of years, and I hold it, but actually I don't know much about it. I really don't know that much about it. So particularly with people, it's good to ask ourselves, what do I think I know about this person? Because we often think we know a lot. But if you actually just slow down enough, like what do I actually know? It's not that much. Then we say, what don't I know about this person? Wow, there's so much we don't know about that person. There's so much we don't know. Far, far more that we don't know than that we do know. And we also should remember that what we do know is a very particular lens that by definition has to be inaccurate. It's a distorted lens, because we can't possibly, in terms of the physical world, we can't see it accurately. We can only see it through both a human lens, but also our particular personality lens, our cultural lens, and so on. Through all of our opinions, all the things that we assume. So whatever we know is off the mark already, which is not to say that we don't have to provisionally, have an opinion sometimes about things. We do, but we need to remember that it's always provisional. So what don't I know? I find this very helpful. What don't I know? There's so much I don't know. And that includes the Buddhist teachings. Even if we've been practicing for decades and decades, we should, I think it's good to have a sense of like, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. But I'm gonna work from a basic working hypothesis, we could say. I'm going to work from the basic hypothesis that everybody is essentially good. That'll be my working hypothesis. Everyone was born a lovely little baby. and then they acquired mistaken views as they went through their life. That'll be my working hypothesis. The Buddha would recommend that we take that as a good working hypothesis. I've been reading The World Could Be Otherwise by Norman Fisher, Imagination and the Bodhisattva Path. So I'll just read a little bit because he's talking about how to bring our imagination to bear on our experience and how we can use our imagination in positive, helpful ways. We can use our imagination destructively. We see this all the time, people using their imaginations destructively, deciding that some people are terrible, or some animal is terrible, or something or other, and creating a whole narrative about that. People do that all the time. But we as practitioners can really bring our imagination to bear in a way that is beneficial. So I'll just read a couple of paragraphs. What exactly is imagination? How can human beings conceive of the impossible? And the examples he gives here is absolute goodness, perfect beauty, truth, and yearn for it. How can we have compassionate feelings about imaginary intangibles such as freedom and justice? How do we see without eyes, desire without objects, hear music where no music exists, and then make that music exist? How do we conceive stories that never happened, images that spring to life from flat surfaces? What is this strange human capacity? Imagination expands our hearts and minds. It brings forth all forms of innovation, artistic, scientific, social. It spawns myth, culture, religion, material progress. All idealism and moral vision depend on imagination. So does love. To go beyond one's own material and practical needs to loving care for another is the greatest of all imaginative acts. Love isn't rational or practical. It isn't data or performance-based. Though it may include animal or psychological needs, its roots run deeper. And then he also mentions this point, but imagination also has another side. It is also deceptive and destructive. Imagination can distort reality, filling us with distraction and confusion. So we need to use our imaginations constructively. And then he does a different way of describing the Four Noble Truths, just slightly different to usual. So, suffering, the first noble truth. All conditioned existence is characterized by dissatisfaction and suffering. And as I like to say, and others like to say, it's not always terrible suffering, but just a sort of a restlessness. Humans seem to live with a kind of restlessness. So this is what the Buddha was talking about, sort of a restless dissatisfaction. Not all the time, but it's kind of often there. And then for the origin of suffering, here it's written, dissatisfaction and suffering originate in the failure of our imaginations to see things as they truly are. I really like that. Suffering originates from the failure of our imaginations to see things as they truly are. And this seeing things as they truly are isn't sort of the details, like the history of this stick. It's not that kind of seeing things as they truly are. It's seeing things as they sort of essentially are. It's not a way that we can get to using cognition, but we can kind of see things as they truly are when our mind is quiet enough. It's why we do Zazen. When it gets quiet enough, sometimes there's a kind of a penetrating through the sort of veils of delusion where we can see, all of a sudden we can just see, oh my God, we are just one unified world. Words just don't ever do it justice. But there is a way of seeing the deep intimacy between all things. So it's the failure of that imagination that we suffer. So it was reading that gave me the idea to talk about these three things to contemplate as a way of cultivating sort of an expansive way of experiencing the world. And kind of creating conditions for us to have these little flashes of really seeing things as they are. Well, I think I might stop there because it'd be nice to have a bit of conversation. And hello to our online Sangha as well. You can see them over there. We are going to get a better system. I have got that email that you sent me, Keith, and I will do something about it. Would anyone in the Zenda or online like to sort of comment or ask a question?
I do have one question.
Yes.
Thank you for your talk. It's about technique. I realised during the meditation that I think in the Zen tradition eyes should be open, and so I was just looking for some advice about that.
Okay. So I don't know if you could hear Lois, welcome, was asking about technique that we have in meditation, about eyes open, eyes closed. Can you hear all right?
Barely hear you, Neti.
That's right, I forgot to turn the microphone on. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you ask that because we often reference the method that we use in Zen to Dogen Zenji, one of the Japanese ancestors, and in his instruction on Zazen, it's instructed to have the eyes open and usually sort of gazing down. I always think of it as a bit like 45 degrees, maybe a bit less, but about that, something like that, and just a diffused gaze, so not staring, just a diffused gaze. So I tend to do that. I think I was doing that mostly today, just a diffused gaze down. But often people do sit Zazen with the eyes closed. I think it's good to experience both. That some of the logic is with the eyes closed, we may be more inclined to get caught in sort of reverie of thought. We might be a little more inclined to go off on a long journey about something, which isn't always a bad thing, because it could be a long journey about the lifespan of this temple, and that would be a perfectly good long journey to go on. So I find if I've got my eyes closed and I've been doing that for a while, I've gone off on a journey, then I go, oh, come back to the breath. And then I open my eyes and look down. And then at some point, my eyes just close. And then I might notice again. And I usually anchor back to the breath. Each time I notice that my mind has drifted away from the present moment and instead is involved in some conversation in my mind, I think it's good not to have any self-criticism about that. It's just the mind thinks it's its job. But when it does that, to come back and anchor with the breath. Feeling the in-breath and feeling the out-breath. And then what I often then do is then I open my eyes. The instruction to have eyes open, some of the rationale for that is that we move through the world with our eyes open. And so if we can have a calm and steady mind that's very present-minded with our eyes open, then we're more able to carry that when we're walking around with our eyes open. But I think they both have their benefits, and they both have their slight shadow side. So, yeah. Is that helpful? Michael's just saying he has to leave. Thank you for joining, Michael. Bye. Jisan.
Thank you for that wonderful talk, Mushin. It made me reflect on and really appreciate the Vajra Chachetika, a self, a person, a living being, and a lifespan, and interdependence. And it just tied all of that together so beautifully in your own words. So thank you for that. I've been thinking, imagination is something that I've been thinking about for decades. And when I read that first chapter of Norman Fisher's book, I really struggled with it. I struggled with it because I felt like it was too narrow. The way that he spoke about imagination was too narrow. I think from a Jungian perspective, imagination belongs to nature. It's not personal. And so, these days I think of it as imagination as something that is dependently arising, and to catch it in the moment. Like how, for example, a person can have an idea and somebody on the other side of the planet can have exactly the same idea and they meet each other on Facebook or something like that. But it happens throughout history. It's not personal. And nature is imaginative. So, I think through imagination, it's something that is much bigger than our individual selves. And even the impetus to harness it is for something beneficial is dependently arisen. They're my most recent thoughts.
Thank you. Yes, that ties in with the who am I? It's dependently arisen. If I apply my imagination to things, how did I manage to do that? Where did it come from that I can do that? It's arisen with everybody else and everything else. Yeah. And I like to think of just inanimate objects. It's not a very nice term for mountains and things to call them inanimate objects. Rivers. It's nice. I like to think of them as having their own sort of sentience. It's different to ours, but they have their own intelligence. They function. Mountains function the way mountains function. They don't act like valleys. They act like mountains, and rivers act like rivers. They don't act like lava. Lava acts like lava. Yeah, it's nice to think of them that way. They've got their own creative way of expressing themselves. Tyson.
Thank you, Neti. I was thinking about the question that was asked around technique and then how that ties in with the talk you gave around these different contemplations and these different ways of doing things. And one of the things I really like about Zen as a practice is that, in my experience, it just allows for, there is no one technique. There's no, you must do things this way. You must focus on the breath and count to 100, and until you can get to 100, then you can't move to the next step. And then it's this flexible approach which says, to take the words of Norman Fisher, it says that we are fundamentally not seeing the world as it is. We are adopted a mistaken view on that. And so it's training ourselves to see the world as it is. And whatever training we need to do that is the right training. It's not a training that's going to be universally applied to every single person at the same time. And so we can take on breath work, we can take on contemplations, we can take on koans. There are many different ways of because we are all dependently arising, because we are all, who am I is a unique kind of thing. What I might need in order to see the world as it is totally different to what someone else might need in order to see the world as it is. I guess my question arising out of that is, I wonder if you could talk briefly about the value of working with a teacher in Zen. I think one of the things I've noticed about Zen is it focuses on a teacher-student relationship a lot more than lots of other Buddhist practices. And to me, my sense of that is that that's coming from a place of recognizing the different practices that an individual might need to do in order to understand the world as it is. But I wonder if you could talk about how the work with a teacher links in with that.
Thank you. Yes, that is true that the Zen tradition emphasises the student-teacher relationship as one-on-one, each student with a teacher, rather than a teacher and a group of students. It is very much the Zen tradition. My experience of it, I started with a teacher straight away. As soon as I decided I was interested in Zen, I went to a temple and met a teacher. So I started straight away with a teacher. And what I felt that she did for me, my first teacher, was sort of did validate, like I could share my thoughts and then she could validate them, or she could say, well, I think that's a little off the mark. How about, so she could steer me when I was going a little off on a bit of a tangent somewhere. She could guide me back, and if I had a particular kind of thought about something, she could say, yes, that's fine. Like, I remember one of the early sesshin, even though the instructions were quite strict in retreat about not reading books and turn up to every period of zazen, I was just having a very emotional experience, and I really needed to go for a long walk by myself. I just felt like I'm not coping. I have to go out by myself in nature somehow. I can't be in the zendo. And I asked her, can I do that? She said, of course, that's what you need to do. You go and do that. But at another time, she might have said something different. Another time, she might have said, a number of times she kind of encouraged me, just be more steady. You can do this. Don't worry. You can do it. Be steady. Don't get caught up in your thinking about yourself. Just be steady. Just breathe. So I think, it's a creative process, I think, being a teacher. Student-teacher relationships are a creative process between the two people. It's not one directional, it's both directions. You work together. So I think it has that very positive ability of kind of sort of fine-tuning someone's practice, because you get to know each other. And it's also a way to verify, if someone's understanding. Because sometimes people feel like they have an understanding, but it's a little off the mark. And the teacher can say, I get where you're coming from, but I think you're missing something here. Or they can say, yes, wonderful, that's right, exactly, something like that. Any last question or comment from anyone? Shogya.
Just a very quick one, just to finish. Can you tell us about the teaching stick, please?
Oh, that's all I know.
But what is the why do you do it?
Oh, I see. When you get authorised to teach, the teacher who authorises you gives you a teaching stick. And sometimes they get it made specifically for you, or sometimes they pass on one that they might have more than one. So like I have 3 now, because my first teacher was in the Diamond Sangha tradition, and Daniel Taranyo, and he gave me a stick that was just a beautiful natural piece of wood that had been polished, so it wasn't carved, it was just natural. And the base of it, even though it was very similar to this in terms of its overall dimensions, but it would just stand up by itself. You could let go of it and it would just stand there. So I still have that stick. And then Kokyo Henkel, my Soto teacher, gave me this stick. And this is the traditional way it's done in the Soto tradition, with this curve and the little loop over here. And they're hand carved, so this would have been hand carved, but I'm not sure who did it. I have a feeling Jean Bush did it, actually, from Santa Cruz Zen Centre, but I'm not 100% sure. And then when I got full transmission in the Diamond Sangha, Sabana gave me another teaching stick, which is similar to this one, but a bit heavier and a darker wood. So that's the traditions, and they're very special. Sometimes you hit people with them. They're lucky you're far away. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll finish. We're going to do that last little chant, and then we do 3 bows all together. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it.